Hello, my friends. I wanted to address a wrongfully and incorrectly placed accusation on my character and how I run ppsw. In a recent comment pinned to a video, Darth Theorist accused me of taking his ideas, and here I'm going to prove to you that I've never done that. As I've done Star Wars What Ifs for the last almost 3 years now, I've had many ideas. As you can see on screen, this specific idea has been on my channel for more than 2 years. As you can see here, I requested for Render Driver to create this thumbnail, shout out to Render Driver, on the 24th of May, 2024, almost 5 months before his poll that I didn't know about went up. Over here, you can see that I have also received the thumbnail on July 2nd, 2024, and as many patrons will tell you, it has been there since July 3rd of 2024, a full 3 months before his video or poll went up. Now, as many of you will know, I have intersected videos with my friends like Fantasy Folklore or Star Wars Galaxy numerous of times, and all of it has been coincidental. The Transformers video that Fantasy and I did the other week was coincidental until we were like, oh, you're doing a Transformers video, and we're like, let's promote each other. Galaxy and I had these 2 Anakin and Mace Windu themed Attack of the Clone videos come out back-to-back days, and they are entirely coincidental. Now, something that is not coincidental is Darth Theorist taking my thumbnails, which I never addressed, and I don't really care to address now. As you can see, these are my thumbnails with, well, not my watermark, and that's alright. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. So with that all being said, I'm a firm believer in spreading the love and lifting others up. So go check out Darth Theorist and support their channel. Otherwise, this has been Sick Anthony. I appreciate you all for listening, and I hope you all enjoy today's video.
Hello.
Our story begins inside a circular training room on the exterior side of the Jedi Temple, in the year 58 BBY. Dooku's blade spun around as he batted away 4 sentry drones. These were holograms, as to not cost the Jedi budget any more than they needed. He blocked and parried as he spun back around, clipping one of the holograms, before dashing towards the other 3. His blade jabbed and interlocked at each intersection, and the sentries he set up to fight against slowly withered away with each passing strike. His breath was firm. He didn't lose it. His eyes scanned the room as the holograms locked back into place, and he smiled to himself. This was a day well done. He looked to the right and could see the dusk. Coruscant was once again going to bed, but the city, like Dooku, never slept. He prepared to go into the corner and grab his cape off the wall when the doors opened and Master Yoda walked in. The little green Grand Master of the Jedi Order asked his former student what it was that he was doing, and he just told his master that he was training. Yoda looked around the room, pondering what Dooku must train so hard for. Their relationship had fizzled out in the years since Dooku was Yoda's apprentice. The boy had become a man, and his opinions on the Council and Yoda himself had shifted vastly in the years since they ended their training. Dooku crossed his arms with his saber in one of his hands, telling Yoda that he found it difficult to sleep when there was so much that could be done. Yoda almost regret coming in here to visit his former pupil. It hurt him deeply to know that their relationship was tarnished. He could have very easily blamed Dooku for this occurrence, but that wouldn't be right. Not in his mind, at the very least. His eyes scanned Dooku's contorted face. He seemed frustrated, as he always did these days. Dooku asked Yoda how he could possibly sleep or teach, knowing that the Order, his Order, wasn't doing the best it could. The Grand Master didn't rebuttal. He knew that Dooku just needed to get this out of his system, one way or another. And while it was easy to stand across from him and blame the Jedi Master for everything wrong in the galaxy, Yoda knew, truly, how deep this went. Dooku finished his vitriol of the Jedi Master, and the Order he presided over with a statement that enforced his personal beliefs. He told Yoda that if he were the Grand Master, then he would have an order that better understood its mandate. Yoda knew what Dooku was trying to do, and truthfully, he had grown wary of it. The game of back and forth, the constant bickering, none of it was fun or enjoyable for Yoda. He resented how the relationship had fallen apart. Now that Dooku had finished training Qui-Gon, he told his former student that to believe these things was one way of understanding. To actually control it, or to enforce it, was a completely different way. Dooku was so tired of the Council's deliberations to do nothing, and their constant waxing of poetry to sound morally ambiguous or something. They tried to be the wisest minds of the Order, but they were simply puppets of the current Chancellor, nothing more than a police force for the Republic. They didn't serve the people. Dooku was ferociously training constantly, because it got such vicious rhetoric out of his system. But Yoda had seemingly interrupted him, and he paid the price for doing so. At the end of everything he had said to his former instructor, Dooku told Yoda that he was done with this conversation. Yoda at this point was not done with it. Dooku continued to cross the line, and so Yoda told his student that he wasn't going to allow him to act so righteous of mind when he understood so little of what the council did or how important their position was. Dooku ignited his lightsaber and challenged Yoda to a spar, telling him the terms. If he won the duel, then he would become the Grand Master. If not, then a punishment could be exacted. Yoda looked at Dooku with shame and disappointment, reflecting on the boy that was once Dooku. He told his former student that his failure to learn was his undoing. Dooku pointed the blade and told Yoda to spar him now. What was the worst that would happen? Yoda turned on a heel and told Dooku that he had gone far enough. This type of behavior would not be tolerated. As Yoda moved for the exit, the doors locked, and he turned back. Dooku questioned if he was running back to his council so that they could help him make a decision that he could surely make on his own. Yoda planted his cane on the ground, his own patience being tested by Dooku's total lack of understanding. Yoda may have upheld the status quo, but there was a reason for everything he did. His eyes looked at Dooku, and he told him that what he wanted would be his undoing. Yoda closed his eyes and reflected on what he had seen just now. He could only see what Dooku's tenure as Grand Master would do to the order he cared about so deeply. Yoda knew that there'd be no pleasant way to frame this, especially if he gave up his position as Grand Master, because he couldn't just hand it over, and he didn't want to spar. Imagine informing other Jedi of such a spar, let alone if he lost it. Dooku told his former instructor that he wouldn't be allowed to leave this room until he was given a chance. The order needed change. It was time for it to be allowed to happen. Yoda's lightsaber then ignited. The master and apprentice charged each other. Their blades collided. Dooku's swift and deep swings were all guided by his curved lightsaber, something Yoda even came to compliment after seeing his construction. This being the first time the two of them sparred since Dooku became a knight. Their blades lit up the small chambers on the exterior of the temple. Yoda didn't hold back, but neither did Dooku. The issue is, despite their weapons colliding across the chambers, Yoda's own thoughts kept bringing him back to what he had foreseen. Yoda leapt across the chambers, and another disarming vision planted itself before his eyes as he and Dooku collided, before he was tossed backwards and tumbled across the ground. Dooku pointed to his master and told him to yield. Had he just surrendered the role of Grand Master? It seemed to him that he had. Yoda shamefully yielded, knowing that in no way would Dooku's pursuit of such a position stop until he realized what he himself was getting into. The conversation with the Council's body after the event would be tiring and troublesome. No one on the Council could believe that Yoda willingly agreed to the spar, but they did understand why he did it. The following day would be the beginning of the nightmare Yoda had foreseen. Yoda truthfully didn't believe he lost the duel. The vision he had conflicted his feelings, and drawn his mind to somewhere it shouldn't have been. Dooku's ascension to the High Council was the first quote-unquote rise to power seen in their order's history for more than a couple thousand years. The Council had maintained it their duty to select those who were deserving of the role. Many times the Council had considered Dooku, because he was a case of a neutral chaotic that the Council could oversee, especially from a regular Councilor position. But Grand Master was slightly different. While the body of the Council usually worked in cooperation, and had for the past several centuries, there were instances of the Grand Master going beyond the will of the collective. The Council was very disgruntled with Dooku's placement within their ranks. He was thrilled about the opportunity to create the change he wanted to see. Despite the rest of the members being obviously irritable with his ascension, based on a spar gone wrong, they listened to what he had to say. The irony of the Grand Master's student not understanding the role of the Jedi High Council was also pretty insane, not to mention. He wanted to pull them away from the Republic, and had, without their permission or even acceptance, sent a message to the Chancellor of the Republic, telling them that the Jedi would no longer represent their leadership or work on behalf of them. This would be heard by the Chancellor later in the afternoon. Dooku, in the meantime, wanted to take the Counselors on a retreat with him, so that they could fully grasp the subtleties of the Force and what it was that he wanted them to understand. The Council had been yearning for a chance to get on this retreat anyways, so it actually came at a pretty decent time for them. But the way Dooku handled it wasn't exactly the best way to do it. Regardless, they followed him on a short retreat to Tython, where he would try and get them to grasp what he wanted them to see. He needed them to understand that their mission was to the people of the galaxy, and all of them remained confused. Despite the Council being political in nature, their loyalty to the Republic did not mean they didn't serve the people of the galaxy. The situation was much more complex than just that, and Dooku would learn more about that in the coming weeks. As a result of him separating himself and the Jedi Order from the Republic, the Chancellor and the Senate itself requested that the Jedi leave Coruscant for the time being, or that they pay heavy taxes on their temple and property. The temple had been an ancient site within the city for eons, but the Republic decided that if they were going to change, then it needed to be seen fiscally. The Jedi were granted great royalties for their service to the Republic, which did extend to their citizens, but if the Order and their new Grand Master wanted to reject said Republic, then they would have to work on their own. This meant that they'd be seen as criminals working as vigilantes on behalf of a religious moral code that did not align with the Republic. They wouldn't be able to request aid from the Republic itself without going through extremely long and excruciating processes, and they wouldn't have the same financial freedom as they had now, or at least before Dooku sent his message. Most of the Republic was very outgoing towards the Jedi. They were the Knights of the Republic, and heroes to many. The Golden Era had ended, sure, but they were still seen in a relatively positive light. Ever since Senator Ryan Court's proposed oversight bill on the Jedi, there have been a collection of other oversight bills in varying degrees. The Jedi had always cooperated though, but they didn't understand that this was a Sith plan, one meant to expose flaws of the Order to politicians of the Republic, which eventually did trickle down to the commoners of the galaxy. The Jedi hadn't been fully exposed to their flaws, which granted them public immunity in most places, aside from the Outer Rim territory planets and systems. But this move by Dooku would completely change all that good favorability. The Grand Master, in an effort to change this newly forming public perception of the Jedi, decided to send himself and a task force of 500 Jedi to the Outer Rim to attack a slave ring. He knew that the people of the galaxy would respond favorably to the Jedi acting righteously, but that didn't exactly pan out either. Dooku went with his young knight, Qui-Gon Jinn, and 500 other Jedi, and they faced the Hutts. The Grand Master led lightsaber first, and in various arenas of combat, the Jedi fought off the Hutt Syndicate members, crewmen, and grunts. These pirate foot soldiers did everything within their power to kill the Jedi, and they did succeed. Even though hundreds of Jedi attacked the Outer Rim and besieged planets without Republic protection, they would win the conflict itself, though it came at a terrible loss. The issue is, and always had been, with the Republic. Dooku wanted to change the Jedi for a flaw that belonged to the system it assisted. Going deep into the Outer Rim didn't change anything for the people who were enslaved. They killed the slavers, and the Hutts limped their way back to Nal Hutta after surrendering Krikan, Kitan, and Nimban. However, the issue is, the Jedi were not a government. They were an order of 10,000, and now they had lost nearly 400 of 500 Jedi sent into the conflict. This wasn't a skill issue for the Jedi. They were simply outmatched number-wise, and they went in with very little strategy at the request of the Grand Master. Now, all the Jedi who did die were volunteers, but for Jedi who lost brothers and sisters, they looked at this operation as unfavorable. Dooku had just killed off 400 Jedi in a rogue attack, and to make matters worse, they couldn't hold the territory they captured. 10,000 Jedi may have existed in the galaxy, but 10,000 Jedi didn't sit on Coruscant reciting poetry and meditating. Most Jedi were on missions. Those who weren't were nursing Jedi for infants, instructors for younglings, or archivists and monks. This radical attack wouldn't see positive change for anyone. The 3 planets saved from the Hutts would face excruciating punishment from them when they came back with a vengeance, killing off another 300 Jedi in the process, ones who again volunteered to go into Hutt space for their Grand Master and their order. This happened over the course of a couple weeks too. The initial battles saw great success as the Jedi cut through Hutt forces, forcing them to retreat, but the loss of 700 Jedi was nothing to scoff at. Typical numbers for Jedi killed during a year weren't typically more than 5, including natural deaths. This was outrageous. See, the thing is, especially within the Council, they understood that there was a certain bureaucracy about everything on Coruscant. They played nice with the Senate, hoping that they would throw them a bone or two, which by the way, wasn't fine and they all agreed to that, morally, but they legitimately couldn't do much more. In Dooku's short tenure, he had ruined the bond of trust between the Republic and the Order and cost the lives of several hundred Jedi. The issue again remained. The Jedi were an order of 10,000. They could go out and help people individually and work on missions, but conquering a planet or multiple wouldn't work for them. They couldn't maintain control over those planets, not with 100 members or 1,000, let alone trying to hold 3 planets at the same time from a Hutt cartel that spanned a lot of the Outer Rim. Instead of sowing hope and bringing peace, Dooku brought hell onto these systems and made the Hutt Syndicate worse. They saw this attack and they cracked down on all of their slaves, working them until their bones broke through their skin. The Hutts didn't play around, and because they were daring the young Jedi Master to come in after them, they sent recordings of what they did to the slaves to Coruscant. There was also what remained in the aftermath of the conflict. The people were grateful for the Jedi, but their homes and towns were ravaged by the war that ensued, and even though they got a couple days of freedom, they lost it in the following weeks. News of this outrageous move became public information, and a slow disdain of the Jedi Order started to rise. Dooku watched the natural status quo, one he initially disagreed with, fizzle out from under him. The worst part is, it wasn't like the Council didn't try to stop this. They forced their hand as hard as they could. The issue being that Dooku was a really good motivator. He was able to convince 1,000 Jedi to go into the Outer Rim and start a war. The first 500 Jedi for the initial assault, and the second group of 500 for holding the systems he captured without telling them that they lost 400 Jedi in the process. In the end, now that the 3 planets were directed back into the control of the Hutt Syndicate again, the Order started to turn heel on their Grand Master. Many Jedi were calling for his resignation and his banishment. Dooku couldn't believe what he had done. He wasn't naive by any means, but his actions had consequences. He refused to see who the true villain was. It was never the Jedi. They could have done more, sure, but look at what it had cost them. People were suffering. Innocents who would have never died were killed. Jedi who fought valiantly elsewhere in the galaxy and could have changed the lives of a multitude of others were now dead, and the faith people had in the Order was completely gone. They had taken their steps too far, and the people had enough. Just as there were calls from within the Order for Dooku's banishment from it, there were calls for the complete removal of the Jedi from Coruscant before they brought war to the core. Another thing that Dooku simply overlooked was how much comfortability came into consideration for the Republic. If they acted like terrible things weren't happening in the Outer Rim, then in their minds, they weren't actually happening. It was a contest of what was favorable or not in the eyes of the Senate, and now the current Grand Master had to live with the consequences of his actions. Yoda was ashamed of his route, but he had made the decision to make Dooku live with his actions. As a result, Dooku was forced to publicly apologize before the Senate, before the Jedi Order, and before the High Council. The counselors all decided that the best route forward was in his banishment, but it would come after he learned his lesson, after he made up for what he did. If it meant he needed to spend the rest of his life in service to those he had wronged, then so be it. But the council was not playing around. This was not revenge, these were the consequences of his actions. The entire Order needed to change their location because he refused and rejected the will and wisdom of the High Council. Dooku did feel true shame though, and he apologized sincerely. But nothing hurt him like the terrified expression in his students' eyes. Jin joined him throughout the combat. He saw brothers and sisters die before his own eyes, and he too would have died if it weren't for Dooku. It changed Qui-Gon's entire outlook on being a maverick Jedi. He was like Dooku but always held control over himself. After seeing who his master became, he rejected a lot of what Dooku instilled into him. As acting Grand Master, Dooku promised that he would make things right. He'd make sure that his failures turned themselves around, and that the Order could come back from such a terrible mistake on his part. He and the counselors around him would spend the next few weeks searching the galaxy for new locations. The tragedy is, this huge family situated here on Coruscant wouldn't last forever, and it wouldn't stay in the same place as it was now. Dooku had completely changed the way the Jedi would situate themselves. There was nowhere in the galaxy that could permit them to reside in full force. They would have to be separated, and that was the tragedy of all of it. Dooku chose Tython for the Archivist world. The ruins of the old temple were there, but it would also be the most hospitable location for younglings and the new Jedi archives. At Jeddah, Quen, and Tanu were outposts, 2 former and 1 currently in operation. The Jedi would go there in 3 separate groups. Dooku would help create separate councils that were under the guidance of the counselors from the High Council itself. In the process of looking for new worlds for the Order, Dooku would accidentally uncover a map to Tanalorr. He'd go there accompanied by Counselor Taris Anube, where they would disarm Dagan Gera and imprison him, leading to a new location being added to the Jedi's expanding territory. After about a year of finally situating everything to the bare minimum, Dooku was forced out of the Order, by Yoda replacing him as Grand Master. Everything had changed, and while initially it was negative, it actually still was. There were a lot of shortcomings, and despite the positivity of the Jedi being more widespread, there was a total lack of trust for them. They had to rebuild centuries worth of trust after a few weeks of distrust ruined everything. Dooku felt terrible. He had betrayed every single value he held true, but this made him resent the Republic more than ever before. Luckily for the Jedi Order, they were no longer bound to it, but this didn't make things instantly better. As Dooku had learned, it was through the Order's cooperation with the Republic that they were able to be an effective force. Without the Republic's aid, Yoda and the Council were working arduously to rebuild relationships in the crumbling of their public trust. Dooku, on the other hand, because of his banishment, went to the Outer Rim world of Alega, before abandoning that planet and heading to Aldelium to learn from the ancient Jedi Master named Kirik Infla, who had been on his Barash vow for many decades. The plotting of the Sith had become a lot easier, and in a way more challenging. The Jedi being removed from the front of the galaxy and from Coruscant made them easier targets. The issue transformed into who the Sith needed a scapegoat so that they could take control over the Republic, because it was no longer the Jedi who were of concern to them politically. Dealing with the Order truthfully required no wars, it just required a strong alliance with the Syndicates, who were now thirsting for blood. The Hutts held grudges, and the Sith would indulge them in the fall of such a thirst. In a short-term alliance with the Syndicate, the Sith would promise resources from Damask Holdings and the Trade Federation. In turn, the Hutts had to destroy the Jedi fully. The only difficult location to get to was Tython, but truthfully speaking, Plagueis and Sidious could deal with that themselves. The two Sith would form their alliance with the Hutt Syndicate, and within the coming month, one of the few Jedi outposts would be hit. The reason this was a no-brainer for the Hutts was because the Jedi chose locations that weren't protected by the Republic. They were in Republic territory but not protected. Jeddah, Tanu, and Tanalorr weren't within protected Republic space. Quen was technically, but not really due to its location near Hutt space, and Tython was simply in the deep core. No one lived there except for younglings and instructors, which is why the Sith had no issue with dealing with that themselves. Because there was no need for intergalactic conflict, the Sith would sit back and watch the first Jedi outpost get smacked by the Hutt Syndicate. Due to the way things were split up, the Council decided that locations for knights were needed. Tanu, while initially being a training ground for younglings, became a training ground for knights, most of them being young into the career as knights. Qui-Gon was here too, among them. The Hutt Syndicate completely blindsided the Jedi Order, and the Knights would run to defend their temple. But every single member, including former Counselor Taris Anube, and 2 other counselors would be killed in the attack. The Hutt simply outnumbered the Jedi, and they were unprepared. A distress signal was sent to the other locations, but no one was able to respond fast enough to assist. There were around 1,300 Jedi on Tanu. This didn't go to say the Jedi were easy targets. They simply didn't have the manpower or firepower to defend themselves. The Hutt fleet first attacked the landing fields from the sky, and they simply bombarded the ground and used Trade Federation battle droids and bombers to do the rest, so that their manpower couldn't be drastically affected. The few Jedi who could get into the sky using whatever they had available lasted only so long against a fleet of fighters. It was a horrendous day for the Jedi Order, and they had very little to counter with. The counselors who survived and weren't present had to come up with a counter-strategy. They couldn't abandon Jeddah City, because that would ruin their reputation more. The same went for Quen, but at the same time, they couldn't afford to protect this territory by themselves. Dooku had completely screwed the Jedi Order over, and now they were looking at possible extinction. Though a voice from their ranks suggested a bold move. Master Tyvoka suggested an attack on the Hutts themselves. If they could force a collective retreat, they might be able to gather enough volunteers to strike at their homeworld at Nal Hutta. The only reason this was a feasible option for the Jedi was because they had no clue that the Hutts were using Federation battle droids. The group used to decimate Tanu had to be massive in size, which was true, but Tyvoka assumed that the Hutts were going on the offensive with everything they had, making Jedha and Quen their next targets and leaving Nal Hutta undefended. The order sent a distress signal to Coruscant, hoping that the Republic might supply reinforcements to the arena of combat. They didn't, but they did enlist the Outlands region security forces to assist them in the quote-unquote worrisome attack that the Republic assumed wouldn't come. As the Jedi were doing this, a group of 150 volunteers joined the full collection of the remaining High Council, and they departed for Nal Hutta. At Quen and Jedha, the Jedi got people to safety and joined forces with the security soldiers to defend this territory. Most of these troopers didn't think anything would come, but they'd be proven wrong when both locations would receive an attack from the Hutts, though they were surprised that the Republic had forces present. The fact that the Trade Federation had forces working with the Hutts would be the first noted concern to the warriors of the Outland groups. Across Hutt space, the Jedi Task Force of 150 warriors would land quietly on Nal Hutta. They were simply targeting the leadership, and as they made their approach, they found that the Hutts weren't as lowly supplied as they initially believed. In all fairness, it had taken months for them to attack the Jedi, because the Sith were funding this entire operation. But to the Jedi, this was mind-boggling. They were prepared for an actual war. The Hutts controlled a lot of the Outer Rim as it was, but this force could conquer it all easily, which is what they planned on doing after wiping out the Jedi with Trade Federation support. Master Yoda led his brothers and sisters on the assault of the capital town of Nal Hutta. The foot soldiers quickly moved to combat the Jedi, but their surprise caught the lot of them in a drunken stupor. Those who were stationed at Nal Hutta were the High Guard. They were the most trusted members of the Hutt cartel, yet they were drinking and gambling because they could afford to. The Jedi weren't desperate enough to make a move like this. Well, as it turns out, following Tanu, they were incredibly desperate. The thousands of Hutt cartel warriors were caught flat-footed, and whether it was stumbling over each other or not having a chance to find their weapons, they were cut down. The Jedi were operating quickly, in order to ensure the survival of their religion and their order. This was for everyone lost, for the slaves, for the freedom of the Outer Rim. As war consumed the town, the Jedi Council cut through the back. Surrounding Yoda were Tyvoka, Yaddle, Yarael Poof, Katri, and Pali Depashun. They quickly disposed of the guards, who lined the interior of the halls inside the main building. Inside the chambers sat the thugs, gathered around, wondering what was coming for them. Every member of their sleazy council was here, because they wanted to ensure the utmost protection. Jabba, for example, couldn't be at Tatooine, because all of his forces were moving on Jedha with the rest of the Hutt cartel. The Hutts watched the Jedi, knowing that they wouldn't dare kill innocent beings. But this council had been pushed to its limits. It's a big reason why Katri and Pali were here, as to make sure that the rest of the council didn't act erratically. Tyvoka slammed his blade down in the center of the room, shooting out a burst of energy, and he roared with ferocity. The Hutts looked around, as their translator informed them that the Jedi were telling them to surrender, to give up their fight. The Hutts initially believed that the Jedi weren't bold enough to do anything like kill one of them, but an explosion rocked the building, confirming that these counselors weren't alone. Yoda told Tyvoka to take Pali and Yarael with him to assist the others. He nodded, as Yoda, Yaddle, and Katri spoke to the Hutt Council. 2 of the 3 Jedi could fit inside the necks of these monstrous legs, but that did not take away from their presence here before them. Yoda addressed them honorably, but also with a hint of disdain. He told them that their operation would be destroyed, every bit of it given over to the Republic. They tried to call his bluff, but he told them that their soldiers would learn the truth upon their coming attacks at Quen and Jedha. Just as Yoda finished, one of their commanders informed them that the Republic had set up a defense fleet outside of Quen. In a few moments more, the same would be said about Jedha. Now the thing is, the Outlands weren't the official military of the Republic. They were simply stationed there to protect outlying systems of the Republic. The Senate simply used them because they didn't have any other military to use for this combat. This led to Jabba deciding to betray the trust of the Sith. He told Yoda, Yaddle, and Katri that they were tasked with this objective by 2 individuals. They called themselves Dark Jedi or something, and they wanted the main order destroyed. These individuals had strong alliances with the Trade Federation, which bought the Hutts. Jabba told Yoda that if he wanted resolution, they could make a deal. The deal was, the Hutts would backstab Plagueis and Sidious, but they in return wanted immunity, and Yoda promised it. As he said those words, both Yaddle and Katri stopped the potential treaty. They turned Yoda around and asked him what he was doing. The 3 Jedi stepped away from earshot of the room, where Yoda explained that he had made many mistakes in his life. The greatest among them was allowing Dooku to spar him. He was going to make up for that mistake here. This temporary alliance was meant to draw these two dark Jedi in, and they would deal with them. Afterwards, the Jedi could break their word, and they could handle the situation however was best situationally for them. Yoda turned back, informing the Hutts that they had a deal. They would get freedom from consequence of the Jedi Order, following the Hutt's betrayal of the Dark Jedi. The rest of the battle for Nal Hutta would play out in a Jedi retreat, quote-unquote, and the Hutts would look to frame things favorably for themselves. While the Jedi had the physical power, the Sith had the political power, but in this scenario, the Hutts were banking on the word of the Jedi, which was a word that they would never dare break based on reputation. From who and what the Hutts knew, the Jedi did not want an elongated conflict with their cartel, because they had already lost so many to them. Yoda had said so, even complimenting the vast military prowess of the cartel, believing that their efforts would have been better used on competitors in the Outer Rim. But the point still standing. The Hutts trusted the Jedi's word over the Sith's, because the Jedi had a long history of abiding by their honor and their code. As far as the Hutts knew, the Sith had vast wealth, and like them, they'd probably backstab them. Killing the Hutts would give them a chance to take everything from the Sith without having to rely on a percent of their cut. When Plagueis and Sidious arrived, the Sith Lord told his student to remain cautious. The Hutts told them about the Jedi attack, and the reasoning for bringing the Sith to Nal Hutta was so they could extend their agreement in person, as well as hand over captured Master Jedi from the Council. When the two Sith walked into the main throne room, they found Yoda on the ground, with chains around his back. Plagueis smiled, looking to the Hutt Council, and then to his apprentice, mocking Yoda's failures as he did. On the ground around him were various bodies of the Jedi Council, plastered on their chests and backs with blaster holes and marks. Plagueis told his student to make sure all of these counselors remained in their condition. 2 crimson lightsabers ignited, as Sidious moved to strike the dead Jedi to ensure their deaths. As he moved to kill one of them, Yoda launched Sidious into the ceiling. He slammed down into the ground as Master Tyvoka lifted him off of the floor and drove him backwards, igniting his lightsaber and having his strike defended. The other Jedi quickly rallied to their feet as Yoda's lightsaber ignited. Plagueis stepped back, planting his foot and driving his weapon forward. Yoda was in his element, focused solely on one thing. There were no visions of past or future. He was in the present, focused on one singular event, right here and right now. The Jedi around him gathered together to strike at the Sith Lord. Plagueis drove his saber to the side, pushing one back, defending another and sweeping the legs out from the final. He stepped away, defending his strikes from Yoda. Behind him, his young apprentice was thrown into the wall, shattering his back on impact. Tyvoka turned away after watching Sidious drop to his knees and then to his face. The Wookiee crushed both of Sidious's blades with his bare foot before watching Plagueis stumble away from Yoda. The Jedi Master leapt upwards, countering the masterful Sith duelist. Tyvoka wanted to end Sidious's life, but even in his Wookiee rage, it'd be against the Jedi way. Despite this, Plagueis was still an open target. Yoda spun around and Plagueis prepared to jab at the remaining Jedi closing in on his position, as his feet were picked up off the ground. He was thrown down and clawed across the face. The mad-clawed Jedi Master ripped flesh from bone, before picking Sidious off the ground again. The Sith Lord swung his lightsaber down towards Tyvoka's back, as he was held above the Wookiee's head. But Katri lobbed her lightsaber and it blocked the strike, giving Tyvoka the chance to drop Plagueis down on his knee, breaking his back all the same. He then lobbed the Sith into a pillar, shattering more bones and the pillar itself on impact. The Sith were defeated. Before taking them, they'd be placed into carbon freezing, thanks to a Hutt chamber within their own town. It was typically used by bounty hunters, but sure, the Jedi could use it. After all, they were getting their immunity from the Order. While the Jedi promised safety from themselves, the Republic did not, and the attacks at Jedha and Quinn proved to the Senate that the cartels were a threat to be worried about, thanks to the Outland Security Forces reporting on the alliance between the Hutt forces and the Federation. This immediately had political ramifications across the Deep Core, as one of the richest megacorporations was in alignment with the Hutt cartel. The irony being, the Federation was promised secrecy. They were attacking Jedi settlements. The issue is, they may have not been Deep Republic territory, but they were still under Republic jurisdiction. The Core wasn't concerned with it, but the Outland Security Forces were, because their entire curation was to do what the Core Republic would not. Now the Senate had their own turmoil to face, especially for the neglect of the rise of the Federation's power. At the end of the day, it wasn't of concern for the Jedi, especially not after losing almost half their order in the span of a year. All of this was a devastating loss that would transform the way they looked at things. their focus would be on the light of the Force, while also preserving the dedication of their order. They should have always been geared around the Force, but it still remained the truth that they needed the Republic to wake up. Sadly for them, it meant they needed to sacrifice thousands of members for the Republic to see the terror of the Outer Rim. The status quo was upset, and the Jedi would ride it out away from the fight between the Syndicates and the Republic. As for the Sith, they were captured. They'd be taken and hidden away inside the ice caverns out on Ilum, so that they may never be found again. Master Infilla would return to the Order, allowing Dooku to remain on Aldelium for the rest of his life, as the guardian of the people. Kurek would eventually become a member of the High Council upon his return, and eventually rise to Master of the Order. The Jedi would grow, and it would take time for them to see such growth, but around them, the galaxy would change. Their position, while still unfavorable at the time of Yoda's death, would change over the years. Dooku would learn a lot of his endeavors, but he would never cross paths with another Jedi for the rest of his life. His efforts did set in stone radical change for the Jedi, but it also wouldn't see its true effects until long after his own death. The Jedi were able, in their divorce from the Republic, to focus on their tranquility and the harmony of the Force. The Council would vet all their members on Tanalorr, and the rediscovery of the location would be incredibly influential in all the decisions made by the Council and the Order going forward. It was in the one Jedi Order, spread out across the galaxy at dozens of outposts, temples, and training grounds, focused on one initiative, maintaining the true identity of the Force and the galaxy, which was, and always shall remain, balance. And that, my friends, is our story. And special thanks to the patrons: Benro Wells, Darth Maelstrom, Ozpin, Darth Vitiate, Seju Jagger, Groot36, Hunter Belden, Rosebird, Angel Dust, Alexander Reese, The Beginning and End, Django Fett Clone, Nick5098, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tib, CC2024, Gallivan Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Granite D. Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlinger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewas670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny DeGuin, Sense Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Callie, Youngling Slayer 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin003, Lord Draken, Fortis Lakes of Star Wars, Erebus, Rex the Wolf, The Man with 3 First Names, Darkseid46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. For supporting the channel, smash that like button, giveaway down below. Might have a bit of a head cold, so sorry if I got caught up anywhere. I really wanted to approach this in a way to counter what I did with the Qui-Gon story from last week. I mentioned before that Dooku is a lot more combative. In the High Council where he joins, it's a lot more level because he's not in control. I'm kind of suggesting that as Grand Master he has like this executive power, and he's inspiring people to do and follow him. As the Grand Master student and Grand Master himself, they're going to follow him. I wanted Dooku to outright fail. I feel like it makes sense for him to be very, especially at his age here, which is probably in his mid-40s, to be kind of naive in a way. Not that he doesn't understand the Republic or the Jedi Council, but he almost seems neglected in a way that Qui-Gon is more understanding. There's a reason why Qui-Gon was offered a seat so young into his career as a Jedi, because he understood it. He was willing to accept what it was, and I feel like Dooku just didn't do that. He saw that the Jedi were flawed, but he also didn't see that the flaw of the Jedi was the flaw of the Republic, and I wanted to kind of disclose that here. So I hope you all enjoyed the story. I love you all, spread the love, and always, my friends, may the Force be with you.